This video explores how the new novel Tribal Code Revolution by Sheila Newman offers a bold and original way for ordinary people to reclaim power from corporate elites and centralized control. The theory review was created with Google Notebook LM and revoiced for clarity. It's this incredible story that blends speculative fiction with some seriously deep demographic and evolutionary theories. It really gives us a totally unique lens to view how human organization, population dynamics, and political power are all tied together. So think about this for a second. What if the key to reclaiming political power is literally written in our DNA and in the way we inherit land? In the fictional nation of New Hollandia, the characters are grappling with the idea that our modern hyper-connected, yet somehow deeply isolated lives might actually be the root cause of our societal and environmental dysfunction. The novel throws out this idea that the solution isn't some brand new government policy, but rather a return to ancient biological and social codes. To really grasp how this works, we're going to hit 5 core concepts: the problem of atomization, defining viscous tribes, marriage rules and demographics, land tenure and power, and finally, the tribal reformation system, the problem of atomization, and what it means to be a dispersed society. So in the fictional nation of New Hollandia, society is going through these massive top-down changes. The characters argue that things like mass immigration, packing people into dense urban cities, and treating land just like any other tradable commodity, well, it completely strips communities of their mutual connections. They call this resulting isolation atomization. You've got people constantly moving, commuting hours to distant jobs, living in transient suburbs. Because of all this geographic flux, citizens lose their stable networks. And without those networks, you lose the ability to organize politically or resist authoritarian mandates. The protagonist, Leonor, actually hits the nail on the head here. She says, New Hollandians are mostly lost, disorganized, and isolated from their original lands. Basically, she believes that without deep social capital, people are just powerless. They're easily silenced and easily dispersed. They've forgotten how to rely on their neighbors or their extended families, and social disorganization has made this much harder. And instead, they just look to distant authorities to solve all their problems. Which brings us to Section 2. Defining viscous tribes with a natural population balancer. Okay, so what is the theoretical fix for all this isolation? It's something called a viscous tribe. Think of it as a closed-loop system. According to the demographic theories, we're looking at this structure naturally prevents overpopulation. Why? Well, because the community has to live within the strict limits of its specific local environment. Without the ability to just export their surplus population or infinitely expand their territory, they naturally develop cultural customs that keep their numbers perfectly balanced with their resources. The whole crux of the argument here is that self-determination and territorial stability are the real keys. It's absolutely not about top-down government mandates. The idea is that when a community has deep roots and actual control over its own land, it just instinctively manages its population to preserve that land for the next generation. Moving on to Section 3, marriage rules and demographics, essentially the mathematics of growth. Now, you might be wondering, how exactly does a tribe control its population size without modern technology? Well, it literally comes down to marriage rules. The characters discuss how the strictness of in-marriage, which is known as endogamy, versus out-marriage, which is known as exogamy, acts like a mathematical dial. That dial directly controls a population's fertility rate. It's fascinating how drastically different rules yield totally different outcomes. For example, traditional Pacific Islanders used really strict rules about who could marry whom within their closed island systems, which led to stable, predictable population numbers. On the flip side, groups like the Amish and the Hutterites are highly endogamous, but they do it in a way that promotes massive families, literally doubling their population every 20 years or so. And then, at the absolute extreme end, you have royal dynasties. They use severe endogamy to make sure their wealth, land, and power never ever leave the family line. Now, the book actually goes straight into biology to back this up, and it uses a pretty wild example: the naked mole rat. Yeah, you heard me correctly. In this species, the queen chooses a single son as a consort. She's essentially enforcing extreme endogamy, and the result is a highly specialized, super resilient, and unusually long-lived species. It's just a really striking way the author shows that rigid reproductive rules are deeply embedded in nature, as hardcore survival strategies. That leads us right into Section 4, Land Tenure and Power, looking at that physical connection. Because listen, marriage rules do not just operate in a vacuum. You absolutely cannot have a viscous tribe without physical territory. The characters theorized that in a functional tribe, people limit their family sizes for a very simple reason. They know their children simply cannot survive without legitimately inheriting a piece of the ancestral land. If land is finite, and it only passes down through strict hereditary lines, then a population has to balance itself. If it doesn't, the next generation starves. So the land itself is dictating the demographics. And this is where we hit a massive conflict in the story. Wealthy elites are actually successfully using these exact tribal rules to keep their corporate empires and estates completely intact. They are operating just like modern dynasties through strategic marriages. But meanwhile, the atomized public is actively prevented from doing the very same thing. Their land is constantly being commodified and subdivided, which keeps them totally dispersed and politically weak. Finally, Section 5, the Tribal Reformation System, which is a digital solution to all of this. So how are the activists in the story planning to fight back? Well, they decide to use the Elite Zone dynastic playbook, but through a digital revolution. Step 1. They map citizen DNA onto a highly secure blockchain database. Step 2. They use that data to identify extended relatives, basically reconstructing lost ancestral clans right in cyberspace. And Step 3. They use these newly formed digital tribes to consolidate land tenure in the real world. They block vote as this massive unified force to reclaim local representation. But technology on its own isn't going to cut it. Databases get hacked, they get outlawed by governments. So the novel proposes this incredibly fascinating workaround, creating a modern form of ancestor worship by building a culture that deeply, fundamentally reveres its ancestors. This creates an unbreakable social and religious glue. This guarantees that members stay fiercely loyal to their new digital tribes, maintaining their human bonds, even if the tech itself goes down. Okay, but how do you actually map out a lost tribe today? As one of the characters explains, DNA and mtDNA act like a kind of telescope, tracing ancient lines back thousands of years. Then autosomal DNA acts more like a magnifying glass, putting recently scattered families from the last few centuries back together. In another fascinating way, they map epigenetic scars. These are actual changes in gene expression, caused by severe historical trauma, like the Irish potato famine. It literally helps group together people who share a profound path of survival and stress resilience. The character, Miss Two-Step, actually explains it to her class like this. She says, "It's like finding hidden threads in a tangled yarn ball." By tracing the DNA, the characters are taking a population that's been completely fragmented by modern industrialization, and they are weaving them right back into a powerful, self-determined community. So, to wrap up this discussion of Tribal Code Revolution by Sheila Newman, I want to leave you with one final, really provocative thought from the text. If our political power, our social cohesion, and even our basic environmental survival is deeply biologically tied to our ancestry and our physical connection to the land, what on earth happens to us when we forget both? The theories in Tribal Code Revolution really challenge us to think about the true cost of atomization and what it might actually take to finally reclaim our self-determination.